The legal letter trembled in my hands as I stared at the company transfer documents. My brother Noah needed my signature to finalize his takeover of Sentinel Security Systems, the same brother who had conveniently stepped in to help when I collapsed during our product launch. 3 weeks of hospitalization had given him just enough time to convince our investors I was no longer fit to lead. "I'm only doing what's best for the company," his message had read. "The board agrees this is the logical solution." Sitting in my apartment surrounded by get-well flowers that felt more like condolence arrangements, I realized this moment wasn't about betrayal or disappointment. It was about who I had become since founding this company, and the one crucial detail Noah had overlooked in his meticulous takeover plan. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I never intended to start a tech company. My background was in research psychology with a focus on behavioral biometrics, how humans interact with technology in ways as unique as fingerprints. I was comfortable in academia, pursuing my doctorate at Pacific Northwest Tech Institute under Professor Wilson's guidance. The authentication system I developed was meant to be my dissertation project, not a commercial venture. The turning point came during a departmental presentation when Richard Harrington, a visiting alum and angel investor, approached me afterward. "Do you realize what you've created here?" he asked, eyes bright with the intensity entrepreneurs recognize in each other. "This isn't just academic research. This is the solution to the biggest problem in digital security." I remember how I hesitated, clutching my presentation notes as students and faculty filtered out of the lecture hall. My authentication system used a proprietary algorithm to identify users through their unique device interaction patterns, the pressure of keystrokes, the timing between clicks, the angle at which they held their phones. It was virtually impossible to replicate, making traditional password theft useless. "I'm a researcher, not a business person," I responded. But Richard's enthusiasm was contagious, and for the first time, I saw my work through different eyes, not just as an academic contribution, but as something that could protect millions of people. 2 weeks later, I took a leave of absence from my program and founded Sentinel Security Systems with Richard's seed funding. The early days were exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. I rented a tiny office in Pioneer Tower with just enough space for myself and 2 developers, Olivia Washington and Marcus Chen, brilliant programmers who believed in the technology enough to accept equity instead of competitive salaries. "We're building something revolutionary," Olivia would say during our late-night coding sessions, her curly hair pulled back, fingers dancing across the keyboard. "Traditional security is reactive. This is predictive, preemptive, personal." Those first 6 months, we lived on coffee and determination. I learned business terminology like burn rates and minimum viable products between refining algorithms and pitching to potential clients. Richard's connections opened doors, but it was the strength of the technology that kept them open. Our first major break came when Shield Tech Innovations, a competitor 3 times our size, suffered a massive data breach affecting thousands of clients. Suddenly, everyone in the industry was scrambling for more secure authentication systems. Our phones wouldn't stop ringing. That's when I called Noah. My brother had always been the business-minded sibling, MBA from an elite school, sleek suits, and a resume full of impressive corporate positions. We'd grown up close despite our different interests, and I trusted him implicitly. With demand skyrocketing beyond our capacity to manage, I needed someone who understood scaling operations. "It's perfect timing," Noah said when I offered him the COO position. "My contract with Meridian just ended, and I've been looking for something more entrepreneurial." His enthusiasm seemed genuine, his business acumen exactly what Sentinel needed during this critical growth phase. Within 3 months, Noah had reorganized our operations, hired a proper sales team, and helped secure our first round of significant funding. The company expanded to a full floor in Pioneer Tower. My awkward academic presentations evolved into polished pitches with Noah's coaching. We complemented each other perfectly, my technical expertise and his business savvy creating a balance that impressed investors and clients alike. "The Mitchell siblings are unstoppable," Richard commented during our first-year anniversary celebration. "Sentinel is positioned to dominate the security authentication market." I should have noticed the first warning signs then. Noah began scheduling investor meetings during times I was committed to product development. He started using phrases like "my sales team" and "my growth strategy" in company communications. Small linguistic shifts that indicated a changing perception of ownership. "You focus on the technology, sis," he'd say with that charismatic smile when I raised concerns. "That's your genius. Let me handle the business side. It's what you brought me in for, remember?" His logic seemed sound. The company was growing exponentially. Our quantum lock authentication system was being implemented by financial institutions and healthcare providers nationwide. My role had naturally evolved to lead product development, while Noah managed operations and investor relations. The division made sense on paper. Then came the product launch that changed everything. We were unveiling Quantum Lock 2.0 at the Tech Fusion conference, our most significant update with adaptive learning capabilities that made the system even more secure. I'd been working 18-hour days for weeks, perfecting the algorithm, running final security tests, addressing edge cases. I remember standing at the podium, bright lights making it difficult to see the audience. My presentation was halfway complete when the room began to tilt. The slide displaying our security architecture blurred before my eyes. I tried to continue, gripping the podium as cold sweat beaded on my forehead. "As you can see from these metrics." My voice sounded distant, as though coming from somewhere else. I remember trying to reach for my water glass, but my arm wouldn't cooperate. The next thing I knew, Noah was at the microphone, smooth and unruffled. "My sister has been working around the clock to perfect this technology for all of you," he explained as paramedics helped me backstage. "That kind of dedication takes its toll. Let me continue the presentation while she gets some well-deserved rest." The diagnosis was severe exhaustion complicated by pneumonia that had gone untreated while I focused on the launch. "Your body is shutting down," Dr. Patel explained in the emergency room. "This isn't optional anymore. You need complete rest and medical care." I spent 3 weeks at Westview Medical Center, drifting between sleep and consciousness as antibiotics battled the infection. Noah visited daily, bringing updates about the company, assuring me everything was under control. "The launch was a massive success," he reported, setting a vase of flowers beside my hospital bed. "We've already signed 5 new enterprise clients. Everyone sends their best wishes for your recovery." I was grateful for his management during my absence. The company continued functioning smoothly, proof that the systems we'd built together were working. At least that's what I believed until Jessica Torres, our company attorney, paid me an unofficial visit. Jessica arrived outside regular visiting hours, her expression serious as she closed my hospital room door. "I'm here as your friend first, attorney second," she began, sitting beside my bed. "There are things happening at Sentinel you need to know about." Over the next hour, Jessica revealed that Noah had called an emergency board meeting 3 days after my hospitalization. He had presented my medical situation as more severe than it was, suggesting uncertain recovery prospects and recommending a temporary leadership restructuring that granted him executive authority in my absence. "He's been systematically consolidating control," Jessica explained. "Reorganizing departments, changing reporting structures, reassigning your direct reports to managers loyal to him. Yesterday, he presented a formal proposal for you to transition to a founder and technical advisor role while he assumes the CEO position permanently." The betrayal felt physical, a pain sharper than the pneumonia. "Why?" I whispered. We were building this together. Jessica's expression softened. The company is on the verge of a major acquisition offer. Shield Tech wants to buy Sentinel, primarily for the quantum lock technology. The valuation is nearly 8 times our last funding round. The pieces clicked into place. Noah hadn't merely stepped in to help during a crisis. He'd seized an opportunity. With me sidelined, he could position himself to reap the rewards of an acquisition I might have resisted. My creation, the technology I'd developed in that university lab long before Sentinel existed, would make him wealthy beyond measure. I was discharged from the hospital 3 days later, still weak but driven by newfound clarity. Instead of going to the office, I went straight to my apartment to assess my options. That's when I found the legal documents Noah had couriered over, papers, transferring my controlling interest to him, with a generous but non-controlling share remaining in my name. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. His accompanying note was a masterpiece of manipulative concern. You need to focus on your health without the stress of day-to-day operations. This restructuring protects the company while ensuring you benefit from what we've built. The board unanimously agrees this is the right direction. I should have felt devastated, but instead, a strange calm settled over me. Throughout my academic career and into entrepreneurship, I'd dealt with underestimation. The female researcher whose work was questioned, the technical founder whose business acumen was doubted. Each time, I'd responded not with outrage but with meticulous preparation. Noah had made a critical miscalculation. He knew business, but he didn't fully understand the technology he was so eager to sell, or the legal protections I'd put in place long before he joined the company. I called Marcus that evening. As one of the original team members, he had remained loyal despite Noah's reorganization. I need access to the original patent filings, I told him, and I need to know who still supports the original vision of the company. The next morning, I contacted Professor Wilson, under whose guidance I'd developed the initial authentication algorithm. I need your help verifying the academic origin of the core technology, I explained. With Marcus working from inside and Jessica providing legal counsel, I pieced together the full picture of Noah's maneuvers and identified the critical oversight in his plan. When I founded Sentinel, I had followed Professor Wilson's advice and filed personal patents on the core authentication algorithms before incorporating the business. Sentinel held an exclusive license to commercialize the technology, but I retained the intellectual property rights. This arrangement was documented in the company's founding agreements, papers Noah had apparently never thoroughly reviewed. If Shield Tech acquired Sentinel without my consent as the patent holder, they would be purchasing a company without guaranteed rights to its primary asset. The acquisition would be worthless. Armed with this knowledge and supporting documentation, I arranged a meeting with Richard Harrington, our initial investor, at Analog Brew, neutral territory away from the office Noah now controlled. I've always believed in the technology, Richard said after hearing me out. But more importantly, I believed in you as the founder. Your brother is a talented operator, but this company exists because of your innovation. With Richard's support, I requested an emergency board meeting. Noah wasn't concerned. He believed he had the votes secured. The board meeting was scheduled for Thursday morning at the Riverside Convention Center, a neutral location chosen to accommodate all parties, including those flying in for the occasion. I arrived early, deliberately selecting a seat that would put Noah and me at opposite ends of the polished mahogany table. Jessica sat beside me, a portfolio of legal documents arranged precisely before her. Her presence gave me confidence. She had spent the past 48 hours preparing for every possible scenario Noah might present. "Are you ready?" she whispered as board members began filtering into the room, exchanging subdued greetings. The tension was palpable. Everyone sensed this wasn't a routine governance meeting. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, smoothing the jacket of the charcoal suit I'd chosen for the occasion, professional armor for the battle ahead. Richard Harrington entered last, nodding briefly in my direction before taking his seat at the head of the table. As lead investor and board chair, he would moderate the proceedings. Noah arrived flanked by two executives from Shield Tech, their presence a clear statement about his intentions. He seemed momentarily surprised to see me looking composed and professional rather than frail from my recent hospitalization. "Glad you could make it, sis," he said, his tone conveying concern for public consumption. "We weren't sure you'd be up for a full board meeting so soon after your release." "I wouldn't miss it," I replied evenly, meeting his gaze directly. Richard called the meeting to order, establishing the agenda. Noah's proposal for leadership restructuring followed by consideration of Shield Tech's acquisition offer. The strategy was transparent. Position the leadership change first to streamline the acquisition discussion. Noah's presentation was masterful. He began with genuine-sounding praise for my technical genius and founding vision before pivoting to concern about my health and the company's need for stable leadership. "My sister created something extraordinary," he told the board, gesturing toward me with apparent admiration. "But Sentinel has grown beyond a brilliant algorithm into a complex business with over 50 employees and enterprise clients depending on our stability. Her recent health crisis, which thankfully wasn't worse, highlights the vulnerability of founder-centered leadership." He displayed slides showing the company's growth since he had joined, metrics demonstrating his operational impact, and testimonials from clients who had worked directly with him. Everything was factually accurate, yet carefully curated to support his narrative of indispensability. "The Shield Tech acquisition represents an extraordinary opportunity," he continued, nodding toward their executives. "Their global infrastructure would scale our technology exponentially while providing exceptional returns to everyone in this room. But they need assurance of leadership continuity to proceed." When he concluded, several board members nodded appreciatively. His argument was compelling, framed as reasonable concern rather than naked ambition. Had I not known about the patent situation, I might have questioned my own position. Richard turned to me. "Ethan, would you like to respond?" I stood slowly, feeling every eye in the room assessing my physical condition, looking for signs of weakness or instability. Instead of moving to the presentation screen, I remained at my place, making eye contact with each board member. "First, I want to thank Noah for stepping in during my absence. His operational expertise has always been valuable to Sentinel." The acknowledgement seemed to surprise him. He had expected immediate opposition. "And I appreciate the board's concern about leadership stability during my recovery." I paused, allowing the conciliatory opening to settle before shifting direction. "However, there are critical factors missing from this discussion that fundamentally impact any decision about Sentinel's future, particularly regarding the Shield Tech acquisition." Jessica distributed folders to each board member as I continued. "The quantum lock authentication system that forms the core of Sentinel's value was developed by me at Pacific Northwest Tech Institute before this company existed. As documented in these materials, I filed personal patents on the core algorithms before Sentinel's incorporation." Noah's expression shifted slightly, the first indication that he hadn't been aware of this arrangement. "Sentinel Security Systems holds an exclusive commercial license to these patents, but I retain the intellectual property rights. This structure was established in our founding documents and disclosed in our initial funding agreements." I nodded toward Richard, who confirmed, with a slight nod. "What this means," I continued, my voice strengthening, "is that any acquisition of Sentinel without securing my consent as the patent holder would result in Shield Tech purchasing a company without guaranteed rights to its primary asset." The Shield Tech executives exchanged glances, clearly hearing this information for the first time. Noah's face had drained of color, his carefully constructed plan unraveling with each word I spoke. "I'm not opposed to considering strategic partnerships or even acquisition offers that align with our original mission of creating more secure digital environments. But any such consideration must acknowledge the actual ownership structure of our intellectual property and ensure that our technology will be deployed responsibly. One of the Shield Tech executives, Taylor Brooks, according to his name placard, leaned forward. To clarify, Ms. Mitchell, are you saying that your brother has been negotiating a sale without authority to transfer the core technology? That's correct, Jessica interjected professionally. The current proposal would essentially sell you a distribution right contingent on Ms. Mitchell's continuing cooperation. Given the circumstances of how this deal was arranged, that cooperation is not guaranteed. The room erupted in overlapping conversations. Richard called for order, his expression grave as he processed the implications. Noah recovered quickly, his business training evident in his composed response. This technical distinction doesn't materially change the opportunity. We can easily modify the agreement to include Ethan's patent rights. This just requires an additional signature, not a restructuring of the entire deal. His attempt to minimize the revelation might have worked if Richard hadn't chosen that moment to intervene. I think we need to address the more fundamental issue here, he said, his authoritative voice silencing the room. Noah has been negotiating a major acquisition while actively working to remove the patent holder from her leadership position. At minimum, this represents a serious conflict of interest and a breach of fiduciary responsibility to the company. The board discussion that followed was heated but increasingly one-sided as members processed the full implications of Noah's actions. What he had presented as logical business strategy now appeared as calculated deception. By the meeting's end, the board had rejected both the leadership restructuring and the acquisition proposal as currently configured. As the room cleared, Noah approached me, his expression a complex mixture of anger and reluctant respect. You outplayed me, he said quietly. I didn't think you had it in you. That was always your blind spot, I replied, underestimating what I built before you arrived. The aftermath of the board meeting unfolded over several intense weeks. Noah resigned from Sentinel the following day, accepting a generous severance package in exchange for a non-compete agreement. The company entered a period of leadership reorganization, with Richard stepping in as interim COO, while I focused on both recovery and strategic direction. The Shield Tech executives, surprisingly, didn't disappear after the failed acquisition attempt. Instead, Taylor Brooks approached me directly with a revised proposal. What impressed us most wasn't just the technology, he explained during our meeting at Analog Brew. It was your commitment to maintaining control over how it's deployed. That alignment with creator intent is rare and valuable. Their new offer involved a strategic partnership rather than complete acquisition. Shield Tech would provide global distribution infrastructure while Sentinel maintained independent operation and control of the technology development. The arrangement would scale our reach without sacrificing our vision. The experience with Noah had taught me to approach business relationships with greater caution, but also with greater clarity about what I valued. The partnership with Shield Tech was structured with careful attention to protecting both Sentinel's independence and my personal intellectual property rights. 3 months after the board meeting confrontation, I stood on stage at the Pacific Northwest Tech Security Summit, my first public appearance since the collapse at Tech Fusion. The audience included industry leaders, former professors, and current Sentinel employees, including Olivia and Marcus, whose loyalty had never wavered. Security technology exists in a unique ethical space, I told the audience. What we create can either protect or expose the people who depend on us. That responsibility requires maintaining the connection between innovation and implementation, between the creator's intent and the technology's deployment. As I described Sentinel's new partnership approach and our expanded research initiatives, I caught sight of Professor Wilson in the front row, nodding approvingly. He had been right about protecting my intellectual creation from the beginning, advice that had proven more valuable than either of us could have anticipated. The most difficult conversation came later that month when I finally visited my parents, home in Cedar Heights for Sunday dinner. Noah would be there, our first meeting since his departure from Sentinel. Our parents knew only that we'd had a business disagreement, leading to his resignation. They had carefully avoided taking sides, maintaining separate relationships with each of us. The tension was immediate when I arrived. Noah sat at the kitchen counter, drinking coffee while our mother prepared dinner. He looked different somehow, less polished, more thoughtful. We exchanged awkward greetings as our father busied himself, setting the table, clearly uncomfortable with the strained atmosphere. During dinner, conversation remained superficial until our mother finally set down her fork with uncharacteristic firmness. "This has gone on long enough," she said. "Whatever happened between you two, you're still family. Figure it out." She and our father excused themselves to the patio, leaving Noah and me alone at the table. The silence stretched between us until he finally spoke. "I've been offered a position with Meridian again," he said. "Senior VP of Operations." "Congratulations," I replied, meaning it despite everything. Noah was talented. His ambition had simply overwhelmed his ethics. He studied his water glass for a moment before meeting my eyes. "I convinced myself I was protecting the company from your inexperience. That you were brilliant, but not business savvy enough to maximize what you'd created." He shook his head. It was easier than admitting I wanted the recognition, the success, story. His candor surprised me. "You could have partnered with me honestly. We complemented each other's skills. That's why I brought you in." "I know that now." He hesitated. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just for trying to take control, but for betraying your trust. You deserved better from me." The apology didn't erase the hurt or instantly rebuild trust, but it opened a door that had seemed permanently closed. We wouldn't work together again. Too much had happened for that. But we could begin the long process of repairing our personal relationship. As weeks turned into months, Sentinel continued to thrive under the restructured leadership team. I had learned to delegate more effectively, building systems that didn't depend entirely on my presence. My health improved steadily as I maintained a more sustainable work schedule. The partnership with Shield Tech expanded our market reach while preserving our core values. 1 year after the failed takeover attempt, I sat with Jessica on the rooftop patio of Pioneer Tower, celebrating Sentinel's most successful quarter to date. The evening air was cool, the city lights creating a backdrop of twinkling potential below us. "Would you have predicted this outcome when you visited me in that hospital room?" I asked her, raising my glass in a small toast. Jessica shook her head, smiling. "I knew you'd fight for your company. I didn't know you'd emerge stronger for having fought." That was the unexpected gift of Noah's betrayal. It had forced me to articulate and defend what mattered most about what I'd created. In protecting Sentinel from his takeover, I had developed a clearer vision for its future than I'd had before the crisis. The patent documents were just legal protection, I reflected. The real safeguard was understanding the value of what I'd built too well to let someone else define its worth. The lesson extended beyond business. Throughout my recovery and the company's transformation, I discovered that resilience wasn't about avoiding damage, but about having foundations strong enough to withstand it. The intellectual property rights had provided legal leverage, but the conviction about why the technology mattered had provided the strength to use it. The following spring, I returned to Pacific Northwest Tech Institute as a guest lecturer, speaking to graduate students about the intersection of technical innovation and business ethics. Many were like I had been, brilliant researchers who hadn't considered the commercial applications of their work or the protections they might need. "Your technical contributions have inherent value beyond what markets initially recognize," I told them. "Protect that value legally, but also protect the purpose behind your creation. Why you built something matters as much as what you built." After the lecture, a young researcher approached me with questions about her biometric security project. As we discussed potential applications and protection strategies, I recognized my younger self in her enthusiasm and technical focus. Document everything, I advised. Not just for patents, but to remind yourself later what you intended to create and why. The documentation that saved Sentinel wasn't just legal, it was the record of original purpose that helped me recognize when we were veering off course. The crisis with Noah had transformed how I approached both leadership and innovation. I was more deliberate about documentation, more careful about governance structures, more intentional about preserving the connection between technical possibility and ethical implementation. That evening, I visited Professor Wilson at his campus office, bringing coffee and his favorite almond biscotti as a small thank you. His office remained exactly as I remembered. Books stacked in organized chaos, whiteboards covered with equations, and the framed first page of his pioneering security algorithm paper on the wall. "Your lecture resonated with the students," he said, clearing space among his papers for our coffee cups, particularly the parts about documentation and intended use. "I had a good teacher," I replied. "You warned me about protecting my work before I understood why it needed protection." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. Technical creators often focus on solving the immediate problem without considering the longer journey of their solution. Who will implement it? How might it evolve beyond their control? That's the question that drives Sentinel now, I explained. Not just creating secure authentication, but ensuring it serves its intended purpose of protecting people's digital lives. As we discussed emerging security challenges and potential research collaborations between Sentinel and the university, I reflected on how my relationship with my own creation had evolved. What began as an interesting technical problem had become a mission, then a company, and now a platform for maintaining the connection between innovation and ethical implementation. Noah's attempted takeover, painful as it was, had clarified what I valued most about what I'd built. Not just the elegant algorithm or the commercial success, but the ability to guide how my creation affected the world. The patent documents had provided the legal mechanism to maintain that control, but the conviction about why it mattered had given me the courage to use it. The following month, Sentinel launched a new educational initiative for universities and technical institutes, providing resources for student innovators to understand both the technical and ethical dimensions of their work. We created templates for inventor notebooks, guidelines for documenting intended use, and accessible explanations of intellectual property protection. During the initiative's launch event, a reporter asked what had inspired this focus on helping young innovators protect their work. "Innovation doesn't exist in isolation," I explained. "It's shaped by the structures around it: legal, commercial, social. Giving creators the tools to navigate those structures ensures their technical brilliance isn't separated from their ethical vision." What I didn't say explicitly was how personal this mission had become. Each student who documented their creation's purpose and protected their right to guide its implementation represented a potential innovation that would remain connected to its creator's intent rather than being redirected by market forces or opportunistic actors. As Sentinel continued to grow, opening offices in 3 additional cities and expanding our research team, I maintained direct involvement in key technical decisions while building a leadership structure that reflected our values. Olivia became our Chief Technology Officer, her technical brilliance complemented by her commitment to our security philosophy. Marcus led our newly formed Educational Outreach Division, translating complex security concepts for students and non-technical users. Noah and I established a cautious new equilibrium in our personal relationship. Monthly family dinners remained somewhat awkward, but increasingly genuine. He excelled in his new position at Meridian, his ambition channeled more constructively. We would never work together again, but we were slowly rebuilding a foundation of family connection separate from business. The most unexpected development came when one of Noah's department managers at Meridian discovered a significant security vulnerability in their customer database. Rather than minimizing the issue, NOAA recommended implementing Sentinel's authentication system as part of their security overhaul. It was a small gesture of reconciliation, acknowledging the value of what I had created even after our conflict. 2 years after the failed takeover attempt, I stood on stage at the Global Security Innovation Awards, accepting recognition for Sentinel's contributions to digital protection. Looking out at the audience of industry peers and upcoming innovators, I reflected on the journey that had brought me there, from academic researcher to founder to survivor of both health crisis and betrayal. Security technology succeeds when it remains connected to its purpose, I told the audience. The most sophisticated algorithm fails if it loses sight of the people it was designed to protect. As I concluded my acceptance speech, I caught sight of a young developer I'd mentored through our educational program, her expression filled with the same passionate determination I had once brought to my research lab. In her, and others like her, the true legacy of Sentinel would continue, not just in our products, but in a philosophy that kept innovation aligned with intention, creation, connected to purpose. The patent documents that had saved my company from NOAA's takeover had been essential legal protection, but the more profound safeguard was the clarity about why the technology mattered. A clarity I was now helping the next generation of innovators develop before they faced their own challenges of control and purpose. As I left the stage to appreciative applause, I knew the most important document I'd ever created wasn't the patent filing or the company incorporation papers. It was the original research notebook where I'd first written, "Authentication should protect people, not just data." That simple statement of purpose had guided me through technical development, company building, health crisis, and betrayal. It continued to guide Sentinel's evolution, ensuring that no matter how our technology changed or our company grew, we remained connected to the essential purpose behind our creation. In that connection lay not just commercial success, but the deeper satisfaction of meaningful innovation, something neither illness nor betrayal had been able to take away. The third anniversary of Sentinel's partnership with Shield Tech coincided with the complete overhaul of our core algorithm, a significant technical milestone that represented more than just improved functionality. Quantum Lock 3.0 incorporated adaptive learning capabilities that made it virtually impossible to replicate user patterns, even with advanced AI simulation tools. The security community had taken notice, with industry publications highlighting our approach as the new gold standard for authentication systems. I stood at the window of our expanded headquarters, now occupying 3 floors of Pioneer Tower, watching employees arrive for the day. The company had grown to over 120 staff members, a far cry from the 3-person operation in our early days. My reflection in the glass looked different too. Confidence had replaced the uncertainty that once shadowed my expressions, even before my hospitalization. The knock at my office door was gentle but distinctive, Olivia's specific rhythm that had become familiar over our years working together. "Morning," she said, entering with 2 coffee cups and setting one on my desk. The final integration tests for 3.0 just finished. 0 vulnerabilities detected, even against the new quantum computing simulations. "That's incredible," I replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "The team deserves something special for that milestone. Let's do a proper celebration, not just the usual pizza lunch." Olivia smiled, settling into one of the chairs across from my desk. In the 3 years since NOAA's departure, she had evolved from brilliant programmer to exceptional CTO, managing our expanded development team with the same care she once gave to individual lines of code. Already arranged, Marcus booked the rooftop at Cascade View for Friday evening, awards for the core development team, open bar, the works. She paused, studying me with friendly concern. "How are you feeling about tomorrow's institute ceremony? Nervous about seeing NOAA there?" Tomorrow marked the dedication of the Mitchell Innovation Center at Pacific Northwest Tech Institute, a joint gift from NOAA and me to establish a hub, where student innovators could develop and protect their work. The Reconciliation Project had been Noah's idea, a way to channel our complicated history into something constructive. After 2 years of cautious rebuilding of our personal relationship, this public collaboration represented a significant step forward. Not nervous exactly, I considered. More reflective. It's been a long journey from that research lab to where we both are now. Olivia nodded understanding. From what you've told me about the center's mission, it seems like the perfect resolution, teaching others to avoid the conflicts you two experienced. The Innovation Center would provide resources I had lacked as a student researcher: legal guidance on intellectual property protection, entrepreneurship mentoring that emphasized ethical frameworks alongside business strategy, and technical facilities for prototype development. Most importantly, it would connect student innovators with experienced mentors who understood the complex interplay between creation and commercialization. That's the hope, I agreed. Turn our conflict into curriculum. Later that afternoon, Jessica Torres arrived for our quarterly legal review. Though Sentinel now employed a full legal department, I maintained Jessica as my personal counsel. Her loyalty during the takeover attempt had earned my enduring trust. "Impressive security reports on the new release," she commented, setting her briefcase on the conference table in my office. "The Government Contracts Committee is particularly interested in the adaptive learning components for critical infrastructure protection." We spent an hour reviewing various legal matters, patent extensions for our core technology, international licensing agreements, and the careful terms of our ongoing partnership with Shield Tech. The relationship had proven surprisingly beneficial, allowing us to scale globally while maintaining our technological independence. "One more thing before I go," Jessica said, pulling a final folder from her briefcase. "I've completed the review of the Innovation Center governance documents. Noah's attorneys have accepted all our proposed amendments. I skimmed the agreement: equal voting rights on the center's advisory board, clear distinction between academic research and commercial applications, and transparent protocols for student intellectual property protection. The structure incorporated everything I had learned about maintaining the connection between creator intent and implementation." "It's strange," I mused, signing the final page. 3 years ago, I couldn't have imagined collaborating with Noah on anything, let alone something this meaningful. Jessica's expression softened. "People can surprise us, including ourselves. You both found better expressions of your strengths once you weren't competing for the same role." That evening, I met Marcus at Analog Brew to review final details for the 3.0 launch event. The coffee shop had become our tradition for major planning sessions, a nod to Sentinel's early days when we couldn't afford proper office space. Despite our growth, maintaining these connections to our origins felt important. "The demonstration team is ready," Marcus confirmed, sliding a tablet across the table to show me the presentation outline. "We've created the most challenging simulation scenarios possible, including the multi-factor spoofing attempt that concerned the banking consortium." Marcus had transformed our educational outreach division into a critical component of Sentinel's market strategy. His ability to translate complex security concepts for non-technical decision-makers had opened doors with clients who might otherwise have been intimidated by our technology's sophistication. "Perfect," I approved, returning the tablet. "And the university showcase is confirmed for next month? That dovetails nicely with the center dedication." "All set. 10 student teams will present their security innovations, with our engineers providing feedback." He hesitated before continuing. "Noah's team from Meridian will be participating as well. He's sending their security director to judge the competition." The news was unexpected, but not unwelcome. Noah's willingness to engage professionally, while respecting the boundaries between our companies, represented significant personal growth. After leaving Sentinel, he had rebuilt his career at Meridian, eventually becoming their chief operations officer with a reputation for ethical leadership that surprised industry insiders who knew our history. That's appropriate, I nodded. The center is meant to bridge academic innovation and industry application. Having multiple corporate perspectives benefits the students. As we finished our planning session, my phone chimed with a message from Professor Wilson. Final walkthrough. Of the center tomorrow morning at 8? Donor preview before the public ceremony. The next morning dawned clear and cool. Perfect weather for the outdoor dedication planned for the afternoon. I arrived at campus early, parking in the familiar faculty lot where I had once hurried, to teaching assistant duties as a graduate student. The path to the newly constructed Mitchell Innovation Center crossed the quad, where I had first explained my authentication concept to fellow researchers, most of whom had politely dismissed its commercial potential. Professor Wilson waited at the center's entrance, his posture still remarkably straight, despite having recently celebrated his 70th birthday. Beside him stood Noah, looking professional, but more relaxed than during his Sentinel days, his trademark suits replaced by business casual attire more appropriate to Meridian's corporate culture. The prodigal Mitchell siblings returned triumphant, Professor Wilson greeted us with characteristic directness. Though I always knew you both would make your mark. Just didn't anticipate the dramatic journey involved. Noah and I exchanged slightly awkward greetings. Our relationship had improved significantly, but still carried echoes of past tension. We followed Professor Wilson into the center, a striking two-story structure with walls of smart glass that could transition from transparency to display surfaces for student presentations. The main innovation lab is on this floor, Wilson explained, leading us into a spacious room filled with workstations arranged in collaborative pods rather than traditional rows. Each station has secure cloud connectivity to the university's quantum computing resources, along with prototype fabrication tools. The space perfectly balanced technological sophistication with accessibility, exactly what I had envisioned when Noah first proposed the joint donation. Student innovators would have access to resources typically reserved for established companies, removing barriers between concept and creation. The Legal Resource Center is upstairs, Wilson continued as we climbed an architectural staircase designed to foster impromptu conversations, along with the Commercialization Ethics Laboratory, where students can simulate various market applications of their technologies and examine potential consequences. This component had been my specific contribution to the center's design, a dedicated space for considering the human impact of technical innovation before market pressures narrowed perspective. The lab featured advanced simulation capabilities that could model how technologies might be implemented or potentially misused in various contexts. That's impressive, Noah commented, examining the ethics lab's capabilities. Most accelerators focus exclusively on speed to market, not responsible deployment. That approach is what created our conflict, I replied, surprised by my candor. Commercialization without ethical consideration leads to exactly the kind of disconnect we experienced. Noah nodded thoughtfully. At Meridian, we've integrated similar impact assessments into our product development cycle. Different path, similar destination. Professor Wilson observed our exchange with evident satisfaction. And that's precisely what makes this center so valuable to students. They're learning from both your journeys. The technical brilliance and business acumen, certainly, but also the hard-earned wisdom about alignment between creation and implementation. We completed the tour with a visit to the historical display in the center's atrium, a tasteful exhibition chronicling the evolution of security technology from basic encryption through biometric identification to current behavioral authentication systems. A small section acknowledged Sentinel's contributions alongside other industry innovators, including Meridian's work in enterprise implementation. The dedication ceremony begins at 2, Wilson reminded us as we concluded the preview. The university president specifically requested that you both share brief remarks about the center's mission. After Wilson departed to handle final arrangements, Noah and I found ourselves alone in the atrium, standing before the innovation timeline that included both our professional journeys. "It's strange seeing our work displayed like this," Noah observed. "Makes it seem like ancient history rather than events we lived through." "Education requires a bit of historical compression," I replied. "Students need the lessons without all the messy emotional context." Noah smiled slightly. "Though the messy context is where the actual learning happened, at least for me." He paused, studying the display. "I've never properly thanked you." "For what?" "For not destroying me professionally when you had the chance." His expression was uncharacteristically vulnerable. "After what I attempted with the takeover, you had every right to expose the deception publicly. Instead, you allowed me a dignified exit." The acknowledgement surprised me. We had cautiously rebuilt our family relationship over time, but had never directly addressed the professional aspects of our conflict. "Publicly humiliating you wouldn't have served any constructive purpose," I said finally, "and it would have damaged the company we both helped build." Still, it showed remarkable restraint. I'm not sure I would have extended the same grace in reversed positions. His candor was refreshing after years of careful conversation. "You protected your creation without becoming vengeful." That's a distinction I've tried to incorporate into my leadership at Meridian. Before I could respond, Wilson returned with the university president, beginning a whirlwind of pre-ceremony activities that occupied the remainder of the morning. The dedication itself was well attended. Faculty, students, industry representatives, and local officials gathered in the plaza outside the center for the formal ribbon cutting. When my turn came to speak, I surveyed the crowd of young innovators who would benefit from the center's resources. "Technical creation is inherently optimistic," I began. "It assumes problems have solutions, that human ingenuity can improve our collective circumstances. But that optimism must be paired with foresight about how innovations might be implemented or potentially misused." I glanced briefly at Noah before continuing. "The Mitchell Innovation Center exists because my brother and I learned this lesson through difficult personal experience. We discovered that protecting technical creation involves more than patents and legal documents. It requires maintaining the connection between a creator's intent and their creation's implementation in the world." Noah's remarks echoed similar themes from a different perspective, emphasizing how business strategy could either amplify or distort a technology's purpose. Together, our presentations offered complementary insights that neither of us could have provided alone, a fact not lost on Professor Wilson, who beamed approvingly throughout the ceremony. At the reception afterward, I found myself surrounded by enthusiastic students eager to share their projects and ask advice about commercialization strategies. Their energy reminded me powerfully of my own early excitement when developing the authentication algorithm that eventually became quantum lock. "Professor Mitchell?" A young woman approached hesitantly, clutching a tablet. "I'm working on a neural interface project that involves similar intellectual property questions to what you faced. Could I show you my approach?" I smiled at the professor title, a common misconception since I occasionally guest lectured at the Institute. "Of course, and please call me Ethan." The student, Madison, according to her name badge, had developed a remarkably sophisticated brain-computer interface that allowed users to control digital environments through directed thought patterns. More impressively, she had created a detailed governance framework specifying how the technology could and couldn't be deployed, regardless of commercial pressures. "This is incredibly thoughtful work," I told her after reviewing her documentation. "You've anticipated implementation questions most developers don't consider until much later, if ever." Madison's expression brightened. "Your guest lecture last semester about documentation and intended use really influenced my approach. Before that, I was focused exclusively on the technical challenges." Our conversation was interrupted by Noah, who approached with 2 glasses of sparkling water. Offering one to me, Sorry to interrupt, but the provost is looking for both Mitchell siblings for a photo opportunity. He nodded politely to Madison. Neural interfaces? I noticed your demonstration in the exhibition hall earlier. Impressive governance structure. Madison looked between us with undisguised curiosity. Our public reconciliation was still recent enough to generate interest, particularly among students familiar with Sentinel's history. Thank you, she replied. I'm trying to establish protective frameworks before commercialization, not after problems emerge. Smart approach, Noah acknowledged. The Mitchell way, though we learned it the hard way. He turned to me with a small smile. Shall we find the provost before she sends a search party? As we made our way through the reception, Noah commented, quietly, that student reminds me of you during your research days. Brilliant, but already thinking beyond the technology itself. The difference is, she has structured support for that thinking now, I replied. That's what makes the center meaningful. It institutionalizes the lessons we learned through conflict. The remainder of the dedication day passed in a blur of ceremonial moments, conversations with faculty about future collaborations, and discussions with students about their innovative projects. By evening, as the crowds thinned and staff began dismantling the reception, I found myself back in the ethics laboratory, examining the simulation systems that would help students explore the consequences of their creations. Testing the equipment? Noah asked, joining me in the now quiet room. Or having second thoughts about our joint venture? Neither, I replied honestly. Just appreciating that something constructive emerged from our disagreement. This space exists because we both learned valuable lessons, albeit painfully. Noah considered this, leaning against one of the simulation consoles. Do you ever wonder how things might have unfolded if I hadn't tried to take over Sentinel? If we'd found a way to balance our different approaches collaboratively? The question had crossed my mind occasionally over the years, particularly as we rebuilt our relationship. Sometimes, but counterfactuals are tricky. We were both different people then, operating from different assumptions about value and purpose. True, though I like to think I would have eventually recognized the importance of maintaining your connection to the technology. He straightened, gesturing toward the center around us. That's ultimately what this place teaches, not just how to protect intellectual property legally, but how to preserve its intended purpose through commercialization. As we prepared to leave the center, Professor Wilson appeared in the doorway, satisfaction evident in his expression. The Mitchell siblings' greatest collaboration isn't a technology or a company, but a philosophy of innovation, he observed. Not bad for a physicist and an MBA who once couldn't agree on anything. The next morning, I returned to Sentinel, headquarters for the final preparation session before the Quantum Lock 3.0 launch. The development team had gathered in our largest conference room, screens displaying performance metrics that exceeded even our ambitious targets. The adaptive learning module has achieved 99.8% accuracy in identifying unauthorized access attempts, Olivia reported, her pride in the team evident, even against the most sophisticated spoofing algorithms currently available. As the technical review continued, I found myself reflecting on the journey from my original authentication concept to this sophisticated system. The core principle remained unchanged, identifying users through their unique interaction patterns, but the implementation had evolved dramatically through multiple iterations, each preserving the essential purpose while expanding capabilities. This continuity of purpose, despite technical evolution, represented exactly what I had fought to protect during Noah's takeover attempt. The patent documents had provided legal leverage, but the real victory had been maintaining the connection between the technology's original intent and its ongoing development. After the meeting, Marcus pulled me aside with news about our university outreach program. The student competition applications have doubled since the Innovation Center dedication. Yesterday. Seems your joint appearance with Noah resonated with the tech entrepreneur crowd. That's encouraging, I replied. Any standout proposals we should watch closely? Several. including Madison Chen's neural interface project, her governance. Framework is particularly impressive. Reminds me of someone else I know. His knowing smile acknowledged the parallel to my own early documentation practices. Later that afternoon, I received an unexpected message from NOAA. Meridian's board approved the security infrastructure upgrade, contract coming Sentinels. Way next week. Congrats. Your technology won on merit, no sibling favoritism required. The notification represented a significant milestone in our professional reconciliation. Meridian's security needs were substantial, making them a valuable client beyond the symbolic importance of NOAA's endorsement. More meaningfully, NOAA had championed our technology based on its objective superiority rather than personal connection. I texted back a simple acknowledgement. Quantum lock will serve Meridian well. Thanks for your confidence in the system. His response came quickly. Not just the system, the creator behind it. Some things I got right, even during my most misguided period. That evening, I joined Jessica for dinner at a quiet restaurant overlooking the river. Though initially my attorney, she had become a trusted friend and occasional advisor on matters beyond legal concerns. Her perspective as someone who had witnessed both the conflict with NOAA and the subsequent rebuilding provided valuable continuity. Meridian signing with Sentinel closes a significant circle, she observed after I shared NOAA's message. From attempted takeover to willing client represents quite an evolution in your professional relationship. It feels like appropriate closure, I agreed. Though the Innovation Center probably contributes more lasting value than any corporate contract. Jessica nodded thoughtfully. That's what distinguishes your approach, seeing beyond immediate business metrics to longer-term impact. It's why protecting your connection to the technology was so important during the crisis with NOAA. As we discussed the upcoming product launch and expansion plans for Sentinel's educational initiatives, I realized how fully I had integrated the lessons from the conflict with NOAA. Every major decision now incorporated consideration of alignment between original purpose and implementation, a principle that had become central to our corporate culture. The following week brought the official launch of Quantum Lock 3.0, with demonstrations for major clients and security industry analysts. The event, held at the Riverside Convention Center, showcased not just the technology's capabilities, but also our philosophy of responsible security implementation, the commitment to protecting people, not just data, that had guided development from the beginning. During my keynote presentation, I emphasized this continuity of purpose. Authentication technology succeeds when it remains connected to its human impact. The most sophisticated algorithm fails if it loses sight of the individuals it was designed to protect. The audience included representatives from government agencies, financial institutions, healthcare systems, and technology companies, all potential clients who would determine how widely our technology would be implemented. Their enthusiastic response to both the technical capabilities and ethical framework suggested we had struck the right balance between innovation and responsibility. NOAA attended as Meridian's representative, maintaining appropriate professional distance during the formal proceedings but approaching me during the reception afterward. Impressive demonstration, he acknowledged, particularly the adaptive response to unfamiliar access patterns. That's something our security team has been specifically concerned about. Olivia's team deserves the credit for that feature, I replied. They developed the progressive learning algorithm that distinguishes between unusual but legitimate access and actual breach attempts. We discussed technical specifications for several minutes before NOAA shifted to a more personal topic. Have you considered who you'll mentor through the Innovation Center's first cohort? I'm taking on 2 student projects focused on operational streamlining. Madison Chen's neural interface is my primary commitment, I confirmed, though I'm consulting on several authentication innovations as well. NOAA nodded approvingly. Good choices. The next generation needs guides who understand both technical excellence and ethical implementation. He paused before adding, "Something we learned the hard way, but they don't have to." As the launch event concluded, I found myself standing on the convention center's outdoor terrace, looking across the river toward the university campus where my journey had begun. The Mitchell Innovation Center was visible in the distance, its distinctive architecture illuminated against the evening sky, a physical manifestation of how conflict had ultimately been transformed into contribution. Marcus joined me on the terrace, offering congratulations on the successful launch. "From a tiny office with 3 people to this," he marveled. "Did you ever imagine Sentinel would reach this scale when you were developing the first algorithm?" "Honestly, no," I admitted. I was focused on solving the authentication problem, not building an enterprise. The commercialization path unfolded in ways I could never have predicted. "Including the dramatic fraternal showdown," Marcus added with the familiarity of a longtime colleague. Though that ultimately strengthened both the company and the technology's governance. His observation captured an important truth. The crisis with Noah, painful as it had been, had ultimately clarified and strengthened my commitment to maintaining the connection between creation and implementation. Without that challenge, Sentinel might have grown successfully, but lost sight of its foundational purpose along the way. As we returned inside for the event's conclusion, Olivia approached with news that several major clients had already requested implementation timelines for Quantum Lock 3.0. The Government Security Division was particularly impressed with the sovereignty preservation features, she reported. "That was your specific addition to the specifications, wasn't it?" She referred to components I had insisted on including, features ensuring that even as our authentication system integrated with client infrastructure, users maintained control over their own biometric data rather than surrendering it to centralized repositories. This approach embodied the principle of empowering rather than exploiting users that had guided Sentinel's development from the beginning. It was important to maintain that boundary, I confirmed. Security shouldn't come at the cost of surrendering personal control. Later that evening, as the event concluded and team members celebrated their successful launch, I found a moment of quiet reflection in my office back at Sentinel headquarters. On my desk stood a small recognition award from the security industry, not for technical innovation, but for ethical leadership in security development, an acknowledgement of our approach to responsible technology implementation. Beside it lay the original research notebook from my university days, preserved as a reminder of where our journey began. Opening to the first page, I reread the simple statement that had guided development through all its iterations. Authentication should protect people, not just data. The principle remained unchanged, even as its implementation had evolved far beyond what I could have envisioned in that university lab. The patent documents had provided crucial legal protection during Noah's takeover attempt, but this notebook, this record of original purpose, had been the true compass guiding Sentinel's development through crisis and success alike. 5 years after the Mitchell Innovation Center's dedication, I received an unexpected invitation from the International Security Governance Commission, a prestigious appointment to their newly formed Council on Ethical Implementation of Authentication Technologies. The timing was significant. The Council had been established in response to growing concerns about privacy erosion and identity manipulation in interconnected digital ecosystems. The letter arrived on embossed stationery, distinctly analog in our increasingly paperless world, a deliberate choice reflecting the Commission's commitment to thoughtful deliberation over technological expediency. Its weight in my hands carried more than physical presence. It represented a shift in how security technologies were being evaluated globally. Your pioneering work maintaining ethical alignment between technological capability and human protection makes you ideally suited for this role, the Commission Chair had written. As authentication systems become increasingly embedded in critical infrastructure, governance frameworks must evolve accordingly. I studied the invitation in my office at Sentinel headquarters, now occupying the entire 32nd floor of Pioneer Tower with expansive views of the city we had grown alongside. The company had matured significantly since our early days, with over 300 employees and implementation partners on 4 continents. Quantum Lock had evolved through several more iterations, each maintaining the core commitment to protecting users rather than merely securing systems. My contemplation was interrupted by a gentle knock. Olivia entered, carrying a tablet displaying the quarterly technical review dashboard. Her role had expanded beyond CTO to include oversight of our research partnerships, including the ongoing collaboration with Pacific Northwest Tech Institute. "The commission invitation?" she asked, noticing the letter on my desk. Marcus mentioned it might be coming. Quite an honor. "And a significant time commitment," I acknowledged. 12 weeks in Geneva over the next 18 months, developing international standards for authentication governance. Olivia settled into the chair. Across from my desk, her expression thoughtful. "The timing actually works well with our current development cycle. The 5.0 architecture is stable, and the research teams are functioning smoothly. If you're considering accepting, we can structure leadership coverage accordingly." 5 years after the Mitchell Innovation Center's dedication, I received an unexpected invitation from the International Security Governance Commission, a prestigious appointment to their newly formed Council on Ethical Implementation of Authentication Technologies. The timing was significant. The Council had been established in response to growing concerns about privacy erosion and identity manipulation in interconnected digital ecosystems. The letter arrived on embossed stationery, distinctly analog in our increasingly paperless world, a deliberate choice reflecting the Commission's commitment to thoughtful deliberation over technological expediency. Its weight in my hands carried more than physical presence. It represented a shift in how security technologies were being evaluated globally. "Your pioneering work, maintaining ethical alignment between technological capability and human protection, makes you ideally suited for this role," the Commission chair had written. "As authentication systems become increasingly embedded in critical infrastructure, governance frameworks must evolve accordingly." I studied the invitation in my office at Sentinel headquarters, now occupying the entire 32nd floor of Pioneer Tower with expansive views of the city we had grown alongside. The company had matured significantly since our early days, with over 300 employees and implementation partners on 4 continents. Quantum Lock had evolved through several more iterations, each maintaining the core commitment to protecting users rather than merely securing systems. My contemplation was interrupted by a gentle knock. Olivia entered, carrying a tablet displaying the quarterly technical review dashboard. Her role had expanded beyond CTO to include oversight of our research partnerships, including the ongoing collaboration with Pacific Northwest Tech Institute. "The commission invitation?" she asked, noticing the letter on my desk. Marcus mentioned it might be coming. Quite an honor. "And a significant time commitment," I acknowledged. 12 weeks in Geneva over the next 18 months, developing international standards for authentication governance. Olivia settled into the chair across from my desk, her expression thoughtful. "The timing actually works well with our current development cycle. The 5.0 architecture is stable, and the research teams are functioning smoothly. If you're considering accepting, we can structure leadership coverage accordingly." Her practical assessment reflected how our management approach had evolved. Where once I had been intensely involved in every technical decision, we now operated with distributed expertise and clearly defined autonomy. This transition had been deliberate, a lesson learned from my hospitalization crisis about creating resilient systems not dependent on any single individual. "I'm inclined to accept," I admitted. "The Commission's work will influence how authentication technologies are implemented globally for years to come. Having a voice in those standards feels like a natural extension of what we've built at Sentinel." Later that afternoon, I called Professor Wilson, now emeritus but still actively involved with the Innovation Center's governance. His perspective had proven valuable during major decision points throughout my career, combining academic insight with practical wisdom. "The commission appointment is well-deserved," he said after I shared the news. "Though I suspect they're getting more than they realize. Not just technical expertise, but a principled approach to balancing innovation with responsibility." "That balance is precisely what interests me," I explained. The commission chair mentioned growing concerns about authentication overreach in several jurisdictions. Some implementations have strayed far from the protective principles we've maintained at Sentinel. "Not surprising," Wilson replied. "When technology transfers from creators to implementers without governance frameworks, the original purpose often gets diluted. Your experience with NOAA gave you unusual sensitivity to that dynamic." The reference to my brother wasn't uncomfortable. Time had transformed our conflict into a case study we both referenced openly, particularly when mentoring students at the Innovation Center. Noah had built a respected career at Meridian, eventually becoming their CEO with a reputation for ethical leadership that seemed distant from his earlier ambitious maneuvering. "I should give Noah a heads up about the appointment," I noted. "The commission's work will eventually impact Meridian's security implementations as well." Wilson chuckled. "The Mitchell siblings influencing digital security policy from complementary perspectives. Quite a development from where you two stood 8 years ago." After our call ended, I messaged Noah about the commission invitation, receiving a characteristically efficient response. "Excellent choice by the commission. Meridian's implementation team would appreciate input on how potential standards might affect enterprise integration. Dinner next week to discuss?" This easy professional exchange still occasionally surprised me given our history, though our relationship had steadily strengthened through our collaboration on the Innovation Center. Our monthly family dinners no longer carried the awkward tension of earlier years, and our professional lives had found comfortable parallel tracks that occasionally intersected productively. The next morning, I met with Sentinel's leadership team to discuss the logistics of my potential absence during the commission's work sessions. Marcus had already drafted a coverage plan that distributed my responsibilities among several directors, while maintaining my involvement in strategic decisions. "We've mapped the commission's scheduled sessions against our product roadmap and investor milestones," he explained, displaying a comprehensive timeline on the conference room screen. "With virtual participation between in-person sessions in Geneva, we can maintain continuity while supporting your contribution to global standards." His meticulous planning reflected how thoroughly we had institutionalized the lessons from my earlier health crisis. Sentinel now operated with carefully designed resilience, clear documentation, distributed expertise, and established protocols for leadership continuity. What had once been emergency measures had evolved into organizational best practices. "The timing aligns well with Madison Chen's fellowship completion," Olivia added, referencing the promising researcher we had recruited from the Innovation Center's first cohort. "She's ready to lead the neural integration team, which frees up additional technical oversight capacity." Madison had fulfilled the potential I'd recognized during the center's dedication, developing sophisticated interfaces between quantum lock and emerging neural computing platforms. Her work maintained the ethical boundaries I had emphasized while extending our security approach into emerging technological domains. After the team meeting, Jessica Torres, still my personal counsel despite having expanded her practice significantly, arrived to review legal considerations associated with the commission appointment. "The commission's conflict of interest provisions are reasonable," she noted, highlighting relevant sections of the appointment documentation. "They recognize that practical expertise requires active industry involvement while establishing appropriate disclosure and recusal protocols." "Any concerns about intellectual property exposure?" I asked, conscious of how our proprietary algorithms might intersect with the standards under development. Jessica smiled. "Always the patent vigilance. The provisions adequately protect proprietary technologies while allowing you to contribute conceptual frameworks. Besides, your approach has always been protecting the purpose more than the specific implementation. Her observation was accurate. Our most valuable protection wasn't in the technical patents themselves, but in the governance frameworks that maintained alignment between authentication capabilities and human protection. This philosophy had become Sentinel's distinctive market advantage, security that empowered rather than exploited users. My acceptance of the commission appointment was announced the following week, generating considerable industry attention. Security publications emphasized the significance of having a technology creator rather than merely policy experts shaping international standards. Sentinel's stock price responded positively, reflecting investor confidence in our influence on emerging regulatory frameworks. The first commission session in Geneva was scheduled for the following month, allowing time for preparation and transition planning. Before departing, I arranged the dinner with Noah to discuss potential implications for Meridian's security implementations. We met at a quiet restaurant overlooking the waterfront, a neutral location that had become our preferred setting for professional conversations. "Congratulations on the appointment," Noah said as we settled at our table. "Though I'm not surprised. The Commission needs voices that understand both technological capabilities and implementation ethics." "Thanks. I'm curious about your perspective as a major implementer," I replied. "Meridian integrates authentication across diverse enterprise environments. What concerns you about potential international standards?" Noah considered the question thoughtfully, a habit he had developed in recent years, replacing his earlier quick decisiveness with more measured consideration. "Standardization inevitably creates implementation tensions," he observed. "Too rigid, and innovation stalls. Too flexible, and protection becomes inconsistent. The challenge is creating frameworks that maintain core ethical principles while accommodating diverse operational contexts." His analysis demonstrated how significantly his approach had evolved since our conflict years earlier. Where he had once prioritized commercial advantage above all, he now balanced business considerations with substantive ethical assessment, a transition he credited partly to lessons learned from our confrontation. "That's precisely the balance the Commission is tasked with developing," I agreed, "standards that protect fundamental privacy and autonomy regardless of technical implementation." Throughout dinner, we discussed specific integration challenges Meridian had encountered implementing quantum lock across their client environments, healthcare systems requiring emergency access overrides, financial institutions balancing security with transaction speed, government agencies navigating complex jurisdictional requirements. "These case studies would be valuable for the Commission's deliberations," I noted as our conversation concluded. "Would Meridian be willing to share anonymized implementation data as part of the standards development process?" "I'll arrange it," Noah agreed. "Our security director already maintains detailed integration assessments. The challenges we've encountered should inform whatever frameworks emerge." This collaborative exchange represented something neither of us could have envisioned during our conflict: professional respect that acknowledged our different but complementary contributions to digital security. Noah's practical implementation experience balanced my focus on core technological principles, creating a more comprehensive understanding than either perspective alone could provide. The weeks before my departure for Geneva passed quickly, filled with preparation sessions and transition planning. Sentinel's leadership team implemented the coverage structure Marcus had designed, with clear protocols for decisions requiring my direct involvement versus those that could proceed independently. Madison Chen had stepped seamlessly into her expanded role leading neural integration research, bringing fresh perspectives while maintaining the ethical boundaries essential to our approach. During our final project review before my departure, she presented innovations that extended behavioral authentication into emerging neural interface environments. "The key breakthrough is maintaining user sovereignty even in direct neural connections," she explained, displaying models that demonstrated how quantum lock had evolved beyond its original keystroke dynamics approach. The system recognizes authorized neural patterns without extracting or storing the thought content itself. Her work perfectly embodied the principle I had written in my original research notebook years earlier. Authentication should protect people, not just data. The technology had advanced dramatically, but the core purpose remained unchanged, a continuity I had fought to maintain through crisis and growth alike. The evening before my flight to Geneva, I visited the Mitchell Innovation Center for a meeting with the current student cohort. The center had flourished beyond our initial vision, becoming a recognized incubator for responsible technology development. Its graduates now populated research labs and technology companies worldwide, carrying forward the principles of aligned innovation we had established. The session with students focused on my upcoming commission work, with thoughtful questions about balancing global standards with cultural variations and privacy expectations. Their sophisticated understanding of both technical and ethical dimensions reflected how the center's curriculum had matured, integrating lessons from our experience into structured learning paths for emerging innovators. How do you maintain connection to original purpose when technology evolves beyond its initial form? Asked one particularly insightful student developing quantum encryption protocols. Quantum lock has transformed significantly while preserving its core protection principles. The question invited reflection on the journey from my university research through multiple technology iterations and business challenges. Documentation helps, recording not just what you're building but why, creating reference points that survive technical evolution, I explained. But equally important is building purpose protection into governance structures, embedding ethical boundaries in how decisions are made, not just in specific technical implementations. This approach distinguished Sentinel's development philosophy. While our competitors focused exclusively on technical specifications, we maintained parallel documentation of purpose alignment, assessing each innovation not just for effectiveness, but for consistency with our founding protection principles. After the student session, I walked through the center's main laboratory, now equipped with advanced prototyping facilities and collaborative workspaces. The building hummed with creative energy as student teams worked on projects ranging from environmental monitoring systems to accessibility technologies for differently abled users. Professor Wilson joined me for this final tour, though he had officially retired from daily involvement with the center. At 75, he remained remarkably engaged with emerging technology trends, particularly their ethical dimensions. Your commission work represents an important evolution in technology governance, he observed as we observed students designing privacy-preserving health monitoring systems, moving from individual creator ethics to structural protections that survive beyond any single implementation. That's precisely what interests me about the appointment, I agreed. Creating frameworks that institutionalize the connection between technological capability and human protection, regardless of who implements the systems. Wilson nodded thoughtfully. The lesson from your experience with NOAA writ large, ensuring that purpose survives transition between creation and implementation. The reference was neither painful nor awkward. Our conflict had been transformed through time and reconciliation into a constructive case study. Both Noah and I regularly referenced it when mentoring Innovation Center students, extracting valuable lessons from what had once been a personal crisis. Noah's sending Meridian's implementation data to support the Commission's work, I mentioned. His practical experience complements my creator perspective in useful ways. The Mitchell siblings' journey from conflict to collaboration continues to benefit the field, Wilson observed with evident satisfaction. Your complementary insights inform both the center's curriculum and now international standards development. The following morning, as I prepared for departure to Geneva, Madison arrived at my apartment to review final contingency plans for the Neural Integration Project. Despite our careful transition planning, I felt the familiar tension that accompanied any significant absence from Sentinel, a founder's instinctive concern about maintaining connection to the company's evolution. "The team understands the research parameters," Madison assured me, reviewing the project roadmap on her tablet. "Especially the restrictions on neural pattern extraction. We'll maintain weekly virtual updates during your commission sessions." Her confidence was well-earned. Madison had grown from promising student researcher to respected innovation leader, maintaining the balance between technical advancement and ethical boundaries that defined Sentinel's approach. Her development represented exactly the outcome. The Innovation Center had been designed to foster technically brilliant creators who understood the importance of responsible implementation. "I'm not concerned about the technical execution," I acknowledged. "The team's expertise is exceptional. I just want to ensure we maintain alignment between capability and purpose as the technology advances into new domains." Madison's response demonstrated how thoroughly she had internalized our development philosophy. "That's precisely why we've integrated purpose assessment into our technical review process. Each advancement is evaluated not just for effectiveness, but for consistency with our protection principles." As she departed, promising regular updates throughout my absence, I reflected on how thoroughly Sentinel had institutionalized the lessons from my earlier crisis. What had begun as personal vigilance about maintaining connection to my creation had evolved into organizational structures that preserved purpose alignment regardless of individual presence. Later that day, as my flight to Geneva departed, I reviewed the Commission's preliminary materials outlining key challenges in authentication governance. The issues identified, transparency requirements, consent mechanisms, override protocols, cross-jurisdictional implementation, reflected tensions between technological capabilities and human protection that had guided Sentinel's development from the beginning. The Commission's composition was impressively diverse, including technology developers, privacy advocates, cybersecurity experts, and policy specialists from various global regions. Their collective expertise would inform standards development from multiple perspectives, creating frameworks with broad applicability across different technology implementations. My window seat offered a view of the city receding below, including the distinctive architecture of the Mitchell Innovation Center visible on the university campus. The site provided reassuring perspective. Sentinel and the center would continue their important work while I contributed to broader governance frameworks that would shape how authentication technologies were implemented globally. As the plane climbed through clouds into clear sky, I opened my tablet to review notes from Sentinel's leadership team. Final updates before international travel limited regular communication. Olivia had added a personal note to her technical summary. "The company will maintain its course. Your work on international standards extends our mission beyond our own implementation. Safe travels." Her message captured something essential about this new chapter. The commission appointment represented natural evolution in my journey with Quantum Lock, from creating the technology to protecting its purpose within Sentinel, to now helping establish governance frameworks that would maintain the connection between authentication capabilities and human protection across the entire field. The principles I had fought to maintain during NOAA's takeover attempt would now inform international standards guiding how authentication technologies were implemented globally. What had begun as personal vigilance about my creation's purpose had expanded to influence how digital identity systems would function throughout interconnected technology ecosystems. As the flight settled into its transoceanic journey, I reviewed the original Quantum Lock governance document I had created years earlier. The framework specifying how our authentication technology should and shouldn't be implemented. Its core principles remained relevant despite technological advancement. User sovereignty over identity data, transparency in authentication processes, proportional information collection, and protection against pattern exploitation. These principles would now inform my contribution to international standards development, extending Sentinel's ethical approach beyond our specific implementation to influence authentication governance broadly. The Commission's work would help ensure that regardless of who implemented identity verification systems, fundamental protections would remain consistent. Technical details might vary, but purpose alignment would be preserved. The appointment represented natural progression in what had become my defining professional focus, maintaining the connection between technological capability and human protection through each transition from creation to implementation. What had begun with securing my individual patent rights during NOAA's takeover attempt had evolved into establishing governance frameworks with global influence. As the plane crossed into international airspace, I closed my eyes, allowing the steady engine hum to lull me toward needed rest before the intensive work ahead. Despite the distance opening between myself and Sentinel, I felt confident in the company's continued alignment with its founding purpose. We had built resilient structures that maintained our protection principles regardless of any individual's presence, including my own. This confidence represented the most meaningful achievement of my journey since NOAA's attempted takeover. I had not only protected my creation during immediate crisis, but helped establish organizational and governance frameworks that would preserve its purpose alignment through future transitions and evolutions I couldn't yet imagine. The Commission's work would extend this approach further, creating standards that maintained the connection between authentication capabilities and human protection across diverse implementations worldwide. What had begun as personal vigilance about my specific technology had evolved into shaping how digital identity systems would function throughout interconnected global environments. The flight landed in Geneva as evening descended over Lake Leman, the city lights reflecting on its dark surface. After collecting my luggage, I found the Commission's representative waiting in the arrival hall, holding a discreet sign with my name. The drive to Hotel Diplomat took us along the lakeshore, offering glimpses of the international organizations that define Geneva's identity as a center for global governance. The preliminary meeting begins tomorrow at 9, my driver explained, as we approached the hotel. The Commission chair asked me to provide you with this orientation package. Several members have already arrived and are gathering informally in the hotel lounge this evening. The elegantly appointed lobby reflected Geneva's understated sophistication. As I checked in, I noticed a small group seated in the corner lounge area, their animated conversation suggesting intellectual engagement rather than mere social pleasantries. I recognized Dr. Elena Vasquez, the renowned privacy advocate whose work on digital autonomy had influenced Sentinel's consent protocols, and Ambassador Kimathi from Kenya, known for his advocacy of inclusive security standards for developing regions. After settling into my room, I reviewed the orientation materials while considering whether to join the informal gathering downstairs. The Commission's schedule was ambitious, beginning with assessment of current authentication implementations across various sectors, followed by identifying governance gaps, and culminating in draft standards for international consideration. My role had been specifically defined as providing technical creator perspective, ensuring the standards balanced innovation potential with necessary protections. This alignment with my professional philosophy made the appointment feel like natural extension of my work at Sentinel, rather than a diversion from it. Deciding that establishing connections with fellow Commission members would prove valuable, I headed to the lounge. The conversation paused briefly as I approached. Then Ambassador Kimathi rose with a welcoming smile. "Ms. Mitchell, we were just discussing your behavioral authentication approach," he said, extending his hand. "Your perspective on protecting the person rather than merely securing the system is precisely what our deliberations need." The Commission's first formal session the following morning began with the chair, Dr. Laurent Benoit of Switzerland, outlining our mandate. Developing governance frameworks for authentication technologies that could be implemented across diverse jurisdictions while maintaining consistent protection principles. Authentication systems increasingly mediate access to essential services, he noted, his French accent precise but unobtrusive. Healthcare, financial resources, government services, Educational opportunities, all now guarded by various verification technologies. How these systems function directly impacts human autonomy and opportunity. As participants introduced themselves, I was struck by the deliberate composition of expertise. Beyond expected technical and policy specialists, the commission included a bioethicist concerned with bodily autonomy implications, a human rights lawyer focused on equitable access, and an economist studying authentication impacts on market participation. My introduction emphasized not just Sentinel's technical innovations, but our governance approach. Authentication should enhance human capability rather than restrict it, I explained. Our development philosophy assesses each advancement not just for effectiveness, but for consistency with protection principles established at creation. The first week's sessions focused on mapping existing implementations across sectors and regions, revealing concerning variations in how authentication technologies were deployed. While some implementations maintained careful balances between security and autonomy, others prioritized convenience for system operators over user sovereignty. During an afternoon discussion of biometric implementations, I shared insights from Sentinel's experience maintaining user control over behavioral patterns. The critical distinction isn't what data is collected, but who maintains authority over its use, I emphasized. Authentication can verify identity without extracting or centralizing the patterns that constitute that identity. Dr. Vasquez built upon this point. This sovereignty principle transcends specific technologies, whether fingerprints, facial recognition, behavioral patterns, or neural signatures. The governance question remains consistent. Does the system preserve the person's authority over their identifying characteristics? As discussions progressed through subsequent days, I frequently referenced decision frameworks Sentinel had developed, approaches that systematically evaluated implementations against core protection principles, regardless of technical specifics. These practical governance tools resonated with commission members seeking structural rather than merely technical solutions. Between formal sessions, I maintained regular virtual contact with Sentinel's leadership team. Their updates confirmed the company continued functioning smoothly, with Madison's neural integration project advancing according to established research parameters. This operational continuity allowed me to focus fully on the commission's work, without concerns about organizational stability during my absence. By the second week, clear patterns had emerged in our deliberations. The commission's draft began taking shape around 4 core principles: informed consent requirements that acknowledged power imbalances, data minimization that limited collection to necessary verification, sovereignty protections that maintained user control, and transparency mechanisms that made authentication processes understandable to those subject to them. These principles aligned remarkably with the governance framework I had established for quantum lock years earlier. The conceptual continuity validated that the ethical challenges of authentication transcended specific implementations. The tension between verification capability and human protection remained consistent regardless of technological evolution. On the flight home following our first Geneva session, I reflected on how thoroughly the Commission's work connected to my journey with Sentinel. The governance frameworks we were developing would help ensure that authentication technologies worldwide maintained the connection between capability and purpose that I had fought to protect within my own company. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.